گایز چطور این بچه ها؟ خوش اومدیم به یه ویدیو دیگه. این بار اومدیم با پارت هفتم داستانهای واقعی. پس اگه از این ویدیو خوشتون اومد حتما این ویدیو رو لایک کنید، چنل منم سابسکرایب کنید، زنگوله بغلش رو بزنید. چنل اینستاگرام من این بالا میاد، حتما اونجا ما رو فالو کنید. سوشال میدیاهای دیگه داخل دیسکریپشن هست، حتما به اونا سر بزنید و بدون معطلی Let's play.
I'm someone who goes on the deep and dark web constantly. It's not what people think, where it's evil and overpopulated with crazy people. That's only a small percentage of the dark web. Years ago, my girlfriend broke up with me and I put her personal information on a forum.
چون باش به هم زد رفت تو دارک رو اطلاعاتش گذاشت. الان یه اتفاقی افتاد.
And soon after that, she disappeared. It's been a while since that happened, and I've ran into people that have disrespected me since. I'm not an intimidating guy, nor do I look intimidating, nor do I ever have physical or verbal conflicts. I always think to myself that these people
دقیقاً شده این واقعی اولی که داخل چنل گذاشتم. واقعی ترسناک اول. خب فکر کنم اول یه بار رو چیز خور کردن. اولش اومده زنش رو می‌خواست بده بکشن تا آخ کردم که خودش هم می‌خواست خودکشی کنه. آخر بانک بهش زنگ زد رفتن رو صابخونه.
People don't know what could happen to them. I work at a fast food restaurant.
Fast food.
And at the time of this story, my manager was really on my case about everything. I would be late, mess up orders, have an attitude with customers, and some other stuff I could name, but it's so much. I understood that I was messing up, but the tone that this guy would talk to me embarrassed me in front of my coworkers, and sometimes in front of customers. One day, though, that was the last straw. So one day I walked into work, 5 minutes before I was due to clock in, and my manager out loud said that the window liquor is finally on time, in front of customers and my coworkers. Everyone laughed at me. During my whole shift that night, he would direct smart comments toward me, while still yelling at me for everything that I did wrong. I made up my mind. I was going to find that forum and give his information. On my walk home, I was going back and forth with myself about whether to do it or not. By the time I made it home, I made up my mind. I didn't shower nor did I change clothes. I went straight to my laptop and I searched. I possibly clicked maybe 100 links because on the dark web there are links that will take you down any rabbit hole. A link named Pork Chop piqued my interest. When I clicked it, I was directed to an About page. It only said 6 words. We find it, we chop it. And another link that said, here's an example of what we do. I clicked it, of course. As soon as I clicked on it, the picture went to the point of view from an old school camera, with the date and time in the corner of the screen. The person behind the camera approached the man and followed him. A few minutes go by, and the man noticed what was happening. He turned around and approached the camera while yelling and screaming at the person for following him. Then all of a sudden, you see 5 huge guys dressed in black wearing a pig mask run from behind the man. Run from behind the man and drag him into the dark. The person holding the camera turns the camera to his or her face.
اون چه گاوی بود این ماست داشت نفهمید. خب چجوری ترسید اومد داشت میرفت سرش داد بزنه. من یه همچین چیزی رو جلوم ببینم 6 روز فقط نمیرم تو اون جایی که اینو دیدم.
And leaves it there for about 5 to 10 minutes. That person also wore a pig mask, but all you could hear was the man screaming and sounds that I don't want to describe in the background. The camera was then turned back around and the sight that I saw was disturbing. It was something that no one would ever want to see. Some people say that they wouldn't wish it on their worst enemy, but I did. After the video was over, there were links. One said pork and the other said chop. I clicked on the pork and it prompted me to put in a code. I didn't have one, so I backed out. So I clicked on chop. There was information that needed to be filled out, like name, height, description, and place. I filled out all the info for my manager.
اسم میخواد، سن میخواد، قد میخواد، مشخصات میگیم همینه، کلا مشخصات شما. مکان کو؟
Name, height, description, and place. I filled out all the info for my manager. And the place, it was my job. I submitted the form. At the end of the screen, it said, "See you soon." 4 days later, while at work, my manager approached me and decided to apologize for the way he treated me, and offered to give me more hours and said that he will work with me more often because he sees potential in me. A few hours later, it was close to the end of the night. My manager helped me with the trash and took it out for me. As I were putting chairs on top of the table getting ready to mop, I looked outside and saw my manager looking over at something, but he looked worried. I moved to get a better look and I saw what he was looking at. He was surrounded by 6 people in a pig mask with weapons in their hands. I ran outside as they swarmed him, except for one person. He had a camera. I forgot all about these guys, and then I put his information on the website. I ran outside as they approached him. He looked at me for help, but I ran back inside and called the police. It took them 10 minutes to get there. When I looked back outside, what I saw was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. I wish I can get the image out of my head. Between the time of me initially seeing them, calling the cops, and running back outside, these guys were gone. But my manager was still there. I went to his funeral the next week. The next day I received an anonymous email that had the whole video. They were watching him this whole time he was on shift. I don't know how they got my email. I never provided any of my information. Till this day, I still feel sick because my manager was starting to be nice to me that day. I can't go back on the dark web.
همین هست میگم که چیزای مزخرف نصب نکنید، دارک بگو تو.
It was the spring of 2017. I was flying out to Chicago for a job interview. It was around 11 p.m. and I was sitting in my gate at the San Francisco International Airport. A storm was raging outside. Rain pouring down the windows as everyone was bundled up on the seats and keeping to themselves. I was just scanning the rows of people in seats sleeping, on laptops or phones, and wearing earbuds before I noticed this one guy. He was sitting in the farthest corner of the gate by the corridor, with no one else sitting around him. He was not on his phone or wearing headphones like everyone else. He has this huge, crooked grin plastered on his face, and he's staring directly at me. He looked pretty average in terms of looks and what he was wearing. But that grin was so creepy, it was beginning to make me shit bricks. Naturally, I turned away and pretended I hadn't seen him. But the fact that he was staring at me made me continuously turn to eye him back without realizing. Eventually, they called our gate and I boarded the plane. I took my seat in the business class right by the window and went on my phone, checking Instagram and texting friends. I did not see the creepy man boarding. An hour later, we were up in the sky. Sometime through the flight, I got up to use the bathroom, and as I was finishing up in there, someone knocked on the door. I called out, "Occupied," but the person continued knocking repeatedly and aggressively. As I was washing my hands, I ignored it, hoping it would go away, but it didn't. So I opened the door to make some ballsy remark, but froze when I saw who was in front of me. It was that guy from the airport, still with that creepy grin plastered on his face. Quickly, I pushed past him and walked to my seat, not glancing behind me. The rest of my flight went normal except for the fact that I couldn't get him off my mind. As soon as we landed in Chicago, I was the first to get my suitcase down from the overhead luggage. and the first off of that airplane. I called an Uber as I walked to the airport parking lot. It was 12 p.m. in Chicago. The Uber came and I drove to my hotel. And as I checked into my room, I realized something horrible. My wallet was missing. I don't know where I could have left it. So I called the airport and asked them to search the plane. They did so and got back to me a few hours later saying they found nothing. I drove back to the airport and spent the whole rest of the day searching and turning up nothing. My only theories were I had somehow left it at San Francisco or it had been stolen. I was able to recover and spent 3 more days walletless in Chicago. But you know what? Here's the scary part. When I got back to San Francisco and drove to my house, I discovered something disturbing. My door was unlocked, and my entire house was trashed. Everything had been broken, and anything worth a slight amount of value had been taken. I checked my security footage and was able to identify the intruder as the grinning man from the airport who, sure enough, had my wallet and therefore my keys. I called the police who found his fingerprints all over my house. The only scary thing was that the prints did not match anyone on record.
خیلی ممنون که این ویدیو رو تماشا کردیم. پس اگه این ویدیو رو دوست داشتین حتما ویدیو رو لایک کنید، چنل منم سابسکرایب کنید، زنگوله بغلش هم بزنید، نظراتتون هم تو کامنت ها بنویسید، چه ویدیویی که دوست دارید بگیرم و حتما بنویسید تو کامنت ها. چنل اینستاگرام منم اینور بالای تصویر میاد یا اینور بالای تصویر نمیدونم دقیقاً، و اینکه سوشال میدیاهای دیگه داخل دیسکریپشن هست، حتما اونجا سر بزنید و اونجا ما رو فالو کنید، ساب کنید، منو به دوستاتون معرفی کنید. پس تا ویدیوهای بعدی پیس اس.